my goodness, you are tuning into another fabulous episode of Conscious Roots TV. I am one of your hosts, Nady.
And I'm Porscha. Today we're going to be talking about tough conversations and how to have them. But before we get there, let's take a moment to acknowledge that this video looks a little bit different from our last videos. Huh, Nady?
It sure does, Porscha. I feel like you should be right here, but you're not. Like you're there, but you're not there.
I know. Oh, goodness.
I can almost reach over and
it's the memory of
hello.
me sitting right next to you on the couch.
Oh, that's so sad. But as you can see, we are, of course, adhering to the stay home mandate so that we can flatten the curve and do our part. So this is our first. We had a bunch of pre-recorded videos, as you could tell, but this is our first one since this mandate.
I know. It's a very strange new normal, and I definitely prefer being in person with Nady, but this works too.
Y'all. So Porscha mentioned that this whole video is all about having tough conversations. So if you are human, chances are you've had a disagreement with somebody at some point. Maybe somebody acted towards you in a way that felt hurtful. Maybe you acted towards them in a way that felt hurtful. But somewhere along the line, feelings got hurt. You weren't seeing eye to eye with somebody else. And so this whole video is about helping you have those super tough conversations with those other humans in your life.
Absolutely. And we know that there is a big piece of keeping conflict healthy that is all about acknowledging any tensions or disagreements you might feel as they arise rather than letting them fester and grow. Some chips on your shoulder. I'm not speaking from personal experience or anything. It's fine. So today we're going to be talking about some steps you can take when it's time to have a tough conversation.
Exactly. So number one, the very first step, we hope that you are writing this down. You may wish to pause in between everything. So the first one, define your goal. So what is it that you are trying to get out of this conversation? What is the purpose of this? So a couple examples here. If you want to say, clear up a misunderstanding where you weren't seeing eye to eye with somebody else, you both experienced something in completely different ways. Maybe you go in there with some open-ended questions, some questions that won't yield a response of yes or no. Conversely, maybe you felt like you've been wronged. Maybe somebody hurt your feelings. And so maybe you go into that conversation very different where you want to be heard. You want to express your emotions for how somebody made you feel. So again, first step, define your goal.
Yes. Oh, God, I love that. It's so important. And I feel like it's often not thought about. So thank you for starting there. The next thing that works hand in hand with that is going in with positive intentions and making positive assumptions. Now, y'all, I happen to be not only a Scorpio sun, but Scorpio half my chart. So you might be thinking, I'm sorry, what? Like, I'm supposed to assume the best of them if they've wronged. Here's how we want you to think about this. It can be really, really hard to go into conversations with an open mind and open heart yourself when you feel like the other person in that conversation came in with judgments against you or thinking the worst about you and your intentions. So remember and think about what it's like to be on the other side of that. It doesn't feel great, and you're not going to open up to people like that. So the best way, yes, exactly, the best way to have a conversation that starts and stays open and feels like a partnership rather than a lecture or an attack is to go in thinking that this is going to be successful. I just want my goal to be reached. I don't want someone to leave feeling badly or to put a burden on somebody else. And I assume that we're going to be successful. We're going to work it out.
My goodness, I'm so glad that you brought this point up about positive intentions and assumptions, because just thinking about my own personal experience as you brought up astrology, I will too. Cancer sun, Virgo rising. Sometimes I have a bit of a score chart in my head of all of the things that have happened. And I might bring in past things. And that is never a good thing to do in an argument. You don't want to bring up your scorecard. That is horrible because that assumes the worst about somebody. And you want to go in there thinking that there's going to be the most positive outcome possible. And if you're dredging up the past, guess what? You're not going to have a positive outcome.
Exactly. And along with those positive intentions and assumptions, it's important to separate facts from assumptions, inferences, and feelings. Now, what we are not saying is that your feelings aren't valid. Of course they are. Your feelings definitely have a place here, and you can bring them up and acknowledge them. But making the conversation about how you feel is probably going to cloud it, and it's going to make sure that you're putting the weight of your feelings on them, which is not actually aligned to any sort of goal.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. It's the difference between telling somebody, you're the reason that I feel so down on myself, to instead saying, when you said this certain thing in our team meeting on Friday, that made me think this, and I know that that wasn't your intention. So to give that a little bit more life, I'm going to go a little storytelling on you. So Nady from their 20s would have been like, oh my gosh, you have wronged me. Not productive. Nady from their 40s would be more like, hey, you said a very specific thing in our most recent team meeting that was 2 hours ago, and I've been thinking about it since, and I'm sure your intention was not to be hurtful to me or to anybody, but this is how I heard it, and I just wanted to have a conversation with you about it. Very different, right? Oh my gosh.
Worlds away, because that first one makes the other person responsible for you and your feelings. And when you start that way, you're more likely to feel defensive. If somebody comes to you and says, you did this to me, you are more likely to be like, I'm sorry, what? And come at them from a defensive point of view, right? The second one, it states a fact of what happened. So this happened, and it draws the straight line to how that happening affected you, which is more likely to be heard and received.
Exactly. So we've come upon our third tip for all of you. Number 3, write it down, practice. Practice, practice, practice. So a couple things I do here just to get personal with all of you. The first one is to jot down an overall flow for the conversation along with some goals that I have for it. This helps me process what it could be like, and also helps me get out things that I might want to say to the person, or, to be honest, things that I don't want to say and that I'd rather burn in my backyard in a fire pit. So the other thing that I love to do, this might seem a little bit cheesy, but I like to practice sometimes with a pet. So I'll role play with one of my cats, or maybe my dog, or even in the mirror with myself. Or sometimes if I feel comfortable doing this, I'll bring in a trusted friend and have them be the person that I role play with. I like to do that for really high stakes conversations to make sure that I get that gumption to have the conversation, because it's like being in the conversation itself, but with somebody that I really trust and love.
That's right. Oh God, I love both of those methods. I love a good role play with either my dog or my cat or another person. They're both great. Okay,
true.
Either way, just remember that when you go into a tough conversation, it should not be the first time you're saying those words out loud, okay? Just like Nady said, you might have needed to work out some things that you maybe don't want to actually include in the conversation with the person, or you just don't want to stumble over your words when you're like really having this conversation. So you'll be able to practice and convey your point more clearly and successfully that way, which brings us to our last tip. Y'all, you gotta hold yourself accountable.
Ooh, and how does one hold themselves accountable? At Conscious Roots, let me tell you what we like to do here. We like to have an accountability buddy, not just because you can say it in a lot of fun different ways, like accountability buddy, but because this person is going to help you actually make this whole thing happen. So perhaps this is, if you chose to role play with an actual human that wasn't yourself in the mirror, it could be that person. Or maybe if you didn't do a role play with that, it's somebody that you really trust and love. So here's the trick with an accountability buddy. You schedule the conversation that is the follow-up conversation that you'll have with them after you have the tough conversation with the other person. There's one of my accountability buddies, right? Hey, Mary Pearl. So you schedule that calendar invite so that for sure you're going to have the tough conversation, because that's another little sneaky way to hold yourself accountable with all of this kind of stuff. Because tough conversations, let's be real, people kind of don't want to put themselves in a situation that feels uncomfortable or that could make different feelings come out or disagreements come out. We naturally, as a human species, tend to shy away from that to various degrees. And so this will help you make sure that you actually have it.
Yes. And also an accountability buddy, and you're right, Nady, so fun to say. Oh, goodness. Accountability buddy is also an outside perspective, which can just be super helpful when you're trying to tackle anything complex. Right. Sometimes our tough conversations are just conversations that we know might not end with both of us actually seeing eye to eye, so much as both of us just hearing each other out. And it could be really, really great to have your accountability buddy be there for you and give you a different perspective as well.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. So don't worry, friends. We know we have just given you a whole boatload of information that you are like, oh my gosh, I've had to pause it all these times to take notes. We've got you covered. Ooh. So if you just scroll down a little bit, just hit the like button on your way there, PS. Scroll down in the notes. You'll see that we've made you a freebie to help you out in terms of having all of these tough conversations with everybody. Don't go willy-nilly with it, but you know, let's get some on the books.
Yes, absolutely. And also subscribe to our channel if you haven't already while you're busy liking our video. You know, it's all down there in the same area. We'd love to see you back every Thursday with our new episodes, 2 p.m. Central, where we're going to be giving you more how-tos on how to tackle some of these very common things that come up in our lives. Thank you so much for tuning in.
And thank you for being you. Bye. Bye.